It happened during the third week of training, the week when everything started to blur together. We'd been on the field from sunrise to sunset, half dead from exhaustion but too proud to quit. I'd always been the quiet one on the team, calm, focused, the one everyone trusted to follow the rules. Maybe that's why Coach often paired me with him, with Ryan, the exact opposite of me in every possible way. Ryan was reckless, loud, the kind of guy who'd turn a sprint into a race even when no one was watching. He had that kind of grin, confident, slightly annoying, but impossible to ignore. I respected him, though I'd never admit it out loud. We were teammates, not friends. That was the line. That day, we were running drills on the trail behind the training camp. Steep slopes, loose rocks, and a fog that rolled in thick and low. It was supposed to be a simple endurance run. I remember shouting over the wind, "Watch your footing!" But Ryan only laughed, that same careless laugh that echoed across the ridge. Then it happened. 1 second he was there. The next, I heard the crunch of loose gravel and a sharp cry that froze my blood. I turned in time to see him slip down the embankment, his body twisting, tumbling until he hit the rocks below. For a moment, everything went silent except the sound of my heartbeat. I ran down after him, sliding on my knees beside where he'd landed. His leg was bent awkwardly, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Ryan, hey, stay with me," I yelled, pressing my hand against his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, hazy with pain, but he still tried to smirk.
"Guess?"
"I shouldn't have ignored you, huh?" he mumbled. I wanted to laugh, to curse, to do anything except feel that crushing panic in my chest. I called for help through the radio, my voice shaking, trying not to show how terrified I was. The medics arrived within minutes, but it felt like hours. They stabilized his leg and loaded him into the Jeep. Before they drove him to the base clinic, he caught my hand and squeezed it weakly. "You're always looking out for me," he said, half smiling through the pain. That single line burned into my mind long after the Jeep disappeared down the hill. Back at camp, Coach called me aside. "He'll need someone to help him for a few days," he said. "You're the responsible one. Stay with him until he's stable." I didn't argue. Maybe because part of me felt I owed it to him. Maybe because guilt had already started to eat at me. If I'd been closer, if I'd grabbed him sooner, if I hadn't let him run ahead. By the time I reached the small recovery cabin, the medic had already left. Ryan was lying on the cot, his leg wrapped in a brace, his face pale but still trying to act tough. "Didn't think I'd get a private nurse out of this," he joked weakly. I rolled my eyes, setting down the tray of supplies. "Don't flatter yourself. I'm just making sure you don't break anything else." He chuckled, then winced in pain. "Fair enough." I sat beside the bed, checking his temperature, his bandages, pretending to be calm, even though I wasn't. The silence between us was thick, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the window. He looked at me for a moment, not the usual teasing way, but softer, quieter. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know," I replied, "but I wanted to." And that's when it hit me, the strange pull I couldn't explain. It wasn't just duty or guilt or even friendship. It was something else, something I didn't have a name for yet. As the rain kept falling and his breathing steadied beside me, I realized that this, taking care of him, being there, was already changing something inside me. I just didn't know how much. The first night was rough for both of us. Ryan barely slept. Every few hours he'd shift and groan, trying to find a position that didn't send a wave of pain up his leg. I sat in the chair beside him, half awake, the dim light from the lantern flickering across the room. Every time he winced, I caught myself holding my breath. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving a soft mist hanging over the trees outside the cabin. I boiled water on the old stove and made instant coffee, the kind that tastes like mud but feels like comfort when you're too tired to care. When I brought it over to him, he blinked awake, his hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning," I said quietly. He groaned, rubbing his forehead. "Tell me I dreamed that fall." "Nope," I said, trying not to smile. "Your leg's still broken and I'm still your babysitter." That earned a weak laugh. "Great. So this is my punishment for ignoring safety rules." "Pretty much." He tried to sit up, but the effort made him grimace. Without thinking, I moved closer, sliding an arm behind his shoulders to help him rise. I could feel the heat of his skin through his shirt, the slow, uneven rhythm of his breathing. "Easy," I said. "You're supposed to rest." He looked up at me, really looked, and for a split second the joking tone vanished. "You're good at this," he murmured. "Taking care of people." I shrugged, pulling back a little. "Someone's got to make sure you don't die of stubbornness." He chuckled, then sipped the coffee I handed him. "I'd say I owe you one, but I can't exactly walk to repay the favor." "Just get better," I said. "That'll be enough." The days that followed were slow, quiet, and strangely intimate. I helped him with almost everything, bringing meals, changing his bandages, helping him stretch his leg when the swelling went down. He hated it. Every time I had to steady him by the arm or help him to the bathroom, he'd mutter something like, "I can do it," only to nearly fall and force me to catch him again. "You really don't like depending on people, do you?" I said one afternoon as I adjusted the pillow under his leg. He sighed, looking away. "I've always been the strong one. The guy who fixes things for everyone else. Being like this, it sucks." I hesitated, then said quietly, "You don't have to be strong all the time." He gave me a small, sad smile. "Easy for you to say. You're still standing." For a moment I didn't know what to reply. The air between us was heavy, not uncomfortable, but charged. I wanted to say something comforting, something that might reach him. Instead, I reached out instinctively and placed my hand over his. He glanced at our hands, then up at me. "You're really something, you know that?" "Something annoying, probably," I said, trying to lighten the moment. That made him laugh, a genuine warm laugh that filled the small cabin like sunlight. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that sound until then. Over the next few days, small things began to change. He stopped trying to act tough all the time. He'd let me help him without argument, and sometimes he'd even thank me, quietly, like it embarrassed him to say it. Once, while I was wrapping his bandage, his hand brushed mine. It was nothing and an accident, but my heart tripped in my chest anyway. I tried to focus on what I was doing, but it was impossible not to notice how close we were. The steady warmth of his skin, the faint scent of his cologne, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me. "Does it hurt?" I asked. He looked down at his leg, then up at me. Not as much as before. His eyes lingered a little too long, and then he smiled faintly. "You've got a steady touch. Guess I'm in good hands." I tried to laugh it off, but my face felt warm. "Don't start with the compliments. You're already spoiled." "Maybe," he said, smirking, "but I could get used to this kind of treatment." That night, as he drifted off to sleep, I sat by the window watching the mist roll in again. I should have felt relief that he was healing, but instead I felt something harder to name, something that pulled at me every time I looked at him. It wasn't just duty anymore. It wasn't guilt or even friendship. It was the way he smiled when I entered the room, the quiet thank you in his eyes, the way he'd lean on me without hesitation. Once, when I was helping him walk from the bed to the porch, his arm slipped around my shoulders for balance. His breath brushed against my neck, and for a second, neither of us moved. He murmured, "You're warm," and I didn't know what to do except laugh softly and keep walking. We stood there for a while, the two of us watching the sunset burn over the horizon, his weight against me, my arm steadying him. He didn't say anything else, and he didn't have to. In that quiet, I started to realize something dangerous. I liked being needed by him, not because it made me feel important, but because it made me feel close. And as the days passed, that closeness stopped feeling like an accident. It started feeling like something I didn't want to lose. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky was calm. The next, thunder rolled over the hills like a growl from the earth itself. By evening, rain was slamming against the cabin roof, wind howling through the trees. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I lit a lantern and set it on the table, its dim glow casting long shadows across the room. Ryan was already awake, propped up against the pillows, his face pale in the flickering light. "Great," he muttered, rubbing his forehead. "First the leg, now the apocalypse." I smiled faintly. "You'll survive. You're tougher than you look." He looked at me, one eyebrow raised. "That's supposed to be a compliment." "Take it however you want." The wind outside howled again and the cabin door rattled. I checked the latch, then threw another blanket over him. He didn't protest this time. He just watched me quietly, his usual spark dimmed by the pain and the storm's unease. I sat on the chair beside his bed. Try to sleep. It'll pass soon. He shook his head. Can't, my leg's killing me and that thunder's not helping. Want some water? No, he said softly, just don't go yet. There was something fragile in his voice that made me pause. I nodded and stayed where I was. The silence between thunderclaps grew heavy, filled with all the things neither of us had said. After a while, he spoke again. You ever think about how weird this is? You and me stuck here like some bad sitcom setup. I chuckled. Yeah, you falling off a cliff wasn't exactly on my to-do list. He smiled faintly, then sighed. You know, I used to hate silence. Growing up, the house was always loud. My brothers, my dad yelling at the TV, my mom cooking. Silence felt like something was wrong. I turned slightly toward him. And now? Now I kind of miss it, he said. When you're hurt, you start hearing things you used to ignore. Your own thoughts, your own fears. His voice was quieter now, almost lost under the sound of rain. Sometimes I think people only like me because I make noise, because I act like nothing can touch me. But you? He trailed off. Me what? I asked gently. You don't treat me like that, he said. You see right through the act, don't you? I didn't answer right away. The truth was I did. From the moment I found him at the bottom of that hill, all his bravado had fallen away. I'd seen him afraid, hurting human, and somehow that made me care even more. Yeah, I said quietly. I see you. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, relief, maybe even gratitude. He shifted a little, wincing. Can you sit here? On the bed, I mean. Just for a bit. Feels weird talking to you from across the room. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down at the edge of the mattress. The wood creaked beneath us. Outside, the rain drummed harder. He leaned back, breathing slow. You ever get tired of being the one who has it all together? Sometimes, I admitted. But someone has to keep things from falling apart. He gave a soft laugh. Yeah, that's you all right. The fixer. We fell quiet again, listening to the rhythm of the storm. The lantern flickered, its flame bending with the draft. I could see his face clearly now. The faint scar on his cheek, the way his hair curled near his temple, the small lines around his eyes when he smiled. I'd seen him 100 times before, but never like this. Never when the world outside felt so far away. He turned his hand palm up on the blanket between us. Hey, he said softly, can I ask for something? I nodded slowly. Sure, he swallowed, looking almost embarrassed. Can you stay close tonight? I know it sounds stupid, but it's not stupid, I interrupted. He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. It's just, when I close my eyes, I keep thinking about the fall. The noise, the feeling of falling and not knowing if I'd stop. I can't shake it. His voice trembled slightly. So if you could just stay, maybe sit here until I fall asleep. I don't want to be alone tonight. My chest tightened. There was no hesitation in my answer. Yeah, I'll stay. He nodded, his eyes closing for a second. When he opened them again, they looked softer and warmer. He reached out a hand, hesitating halfway as if unsure. I met him halfway, my fingers brushing his before I took his hand gently. It was a simple touch, but it carried everything neither of us dared to say. His hand was warm, his grip firm but trembling slightly. I could feel his pulse against my skin, fast and human and alive. Thank you, he whispered. We sat like that for a long time, my hand in his, the storm raging outside. The wind roared, the trees creaked, but none of it mattered. The only thing that felt real was the quiet between us. After a while, he shifted slightly, making space beside him. You can lie down if you want. You'll be more comfortable. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of what it might mean. Still, when he looked at me with that tired, vulnerable expression, I couldn't refuse. I slipped under the blanket beside him, careful not to jostle his leg. The mattress dipped beneath our combined weight. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear his breathing, slow, uneven, feel the warmth radiating from his body through the thin space between us. Then softly he said, "This is what I meant. Just this. I didn't want anything else. Just not to feel alone tonight." I turned my head toward him. In the faint light, his eyes met mine, open, honest, unguarded. "You're not alone," I whispered. He smiled, small and genuine, before closing his eyes. I watched him drift toward sleep, his hand still loosely holding mine under the blanket. Outside, the thunder began to fade, leaving only the steady hum of rain on the roof. The room felt smaller now, but in a way that felt safe, like we'd built our own little world inside it. As I lay there, listening to his breathing, something settled quietly in my chest, a realization I wasn't ready to name. All I knew was that when the storm passed, nothing between us would be quite the same again. Morning came quietly, the kind that slips in through the cracks without permission. The storm had passed, leaving behind a thin layer of fog and the smell of damp earth. The first light spilled through the cabin window, painting everything in pale gold. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was him, still asleep, his head turned slightly toward me, one hand resting just inches from mine on the blanket. For a few seconds I didn't move. I just watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, the soft curve of his mouth, the way the light caught the faint stubble along his jaw. Then reality hit. I was still lying next to him. My hand was still tangled loosely with his, and the memory of last night, his voice, his fear, the way he'd asked me to stay, came rushing back all at once. I slipped out of bed carefully, my heart thudding too loud in the quiet room. The air felt heavier somehow, like the space between us had changed shape overnight. I busied myself making coffee, pretending the noise of the kettle could drown out the thoughts in my head. When Ryan stirred awake, his voice was groggy but warm. "You make coffee like a soldier." I turned, forcing a small smile. "And you complain like one." He chuckled, but it came with a soft wince as he adjusted his leg. "Guess I'm still alive, huh?" "Barely," I teased, handing him the mug. "You slept through the apocalypse." He smiled at that, and for a second it almost felt normal again. Except it wasn't. There was something different in the way he looked at me now. His gaze lingered just a little longer, his voice softer when he spoke. "Thanks for staying last night," he said quietly. I froze for a moment, then nodded. "You needed it." "Yeah," he murmured, eyes flicking away. "I did." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was thick with things neither of us wanted to name. Around noon, 2 teammates stopped by to check in. I opened the door quickly, blocking most of the view inside. "How's Ryan doing?" One of them asked, holding a bag of supplies. "Better," I said. "He's resting." Ryan's voice floated weakly from behind me, all charm and bravado again. "Tell them I'm tougher than I look." They laughed, handed me the supplies, and left soon after. As soon as the door closed, Ryan grinned at me. "You didn't have to guard the door like that." "What, worried they think something's going on?" I rolled my eyes. "You really want to deal with their gossip right now?" He raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Depends what they'd be gossiping about." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, and I turned away quickly, pretending to tidy the table. He laughed softly, not mocking, just amused, and I could hear the affection buried under the humor. "You're blushing," he said. "I'm not." "You are." I shot him a look, and he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, fine. You win." But after that, the air between us shifted again. His teasing wasn't sharp anymore. It was gentle, almost protective. When I helped him move to the porch to get some fresh air, he leaned into me a little more than before. When I adjusted his bandage, his fingers brushed mine deliberately this time, a slow, lingering touch that sent something electric through me. He must have seen the conflict on my face, because his smile faded. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" I took a breath. "About last night," he stilled. The air seemed to hold its breath with us. I started, then stopped, searching for the right words. I don't know what it meant. You asked me to stay, and I did. But now I don't know if I crossed a line. Maybe I shouldn't have. "Don't," he interrupted gently. "Don't do that thing where you make everything your fault." I looked at him, surprised. He met my gaze steadily, his voice quieter now. "It meant something to me. Last night, I wasn't just scared of the storm. I was scared of waking up alone. I've been pretending for a long time that I don't need anyone. But when you were there, it was the first time in a while I felt safe." His words hit deeper than I expected. I swallowed hard. "You could have told me that before." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, well, I'm not great at saying things that matter." We fell silent again, the kind of silence that hums with everything unsaid. I sat down beside him, our shoulders barely touching. He turned his head slightly, looking at me. I'm not asking for anything, he said softly. I just don't want you to think it was meaningless. I met his eyes, and for the first time there was no wall between us. No teasing, no roles, no pretending. Just two people caught somewhere between fear and wanting. Ryan, I said quietly. It didn't feel meaningless. He exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath all morning. His hand moved toward mine again, hesitant but sure. I didn't pull away this time. For a long moment we just sat there, our fingers barely touching, the air between us thick with possibility. Then he leaned forward, slow enough that I could have stopped him, but I didn't. His lips met mine softly, tentatively, as if he was afraid the moment might break if he pushed too hard. It wasn't a perfect kiss, a little awkward, a little unsure, but it was real, honest. When we finally pulled apart, he smiled a little, his eyes searching mine. So, that just happened. Yeah, I whispered, still catching my breath. It did. He laughed quietly, the sound full of relief and something warmer. Guess we're really bad at keeping things simple. Maybe simple's overrated, I said. He tilted his head, his voice barely above a whisper. You might be right. For the rest of the afternoon, we didn't talk much. He dozed off with the sunlight spilling across his face, and I sat beside him, quietly tracing the moment in my mind. Everything had changed, but for once it didn't scare me, because deep down I knew. Something had started in that storm, and whatever it was, neither of us wanted it to end. It's strange how easily care can turn into something deeper, how shared silence can start to feel like home. After that night, Daniel and I settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and foreign. The awkwardness from that morning had faded into something softer, something unspoken but always present. The air between us felt charged yet comfortable, like we both knew what was happening but didn't dare name it too soon. Each morning began the same way. I'd knock lightly on his door, pretending I wasn't already awake, just waiting to see his sleepy smile. He'd usually greet me with some sarcastic remark. You're early. Can't stay away from me, huh? I'd roll my eyes, setting down his breakfast tray. Someone has to make sure you don't starve while pretending to be independent. But he'd grin, that half smile that always hit me harder than I wanted to admit. You love it. Maybe I did. Helping him through recovery had stopped feeling like duty. Now it was connection. When he winced in pain during stretches, I'd steady his hand and he'd grip mine in return. His skin was always warm. His fingers lingered a second too long. Sometimes when he caught me staring, he'd tilt his head and say, "What?" with that teasing, boyish grin. "Nothing," I'd mutter, turning away, my pulse racing. We had started physical therapy a week ago. I'd guide his movements, coax him through slow walks along the edge of the training field. His limp was improving, but he'd still lean on me, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes I suspected just because he wanted to. One afternoon, after a particularly long session, he sank into the grass beside me and let out a breathless laugh. "You're bossier than the doctor," he said. "And you're worse than any patient I've ever had," I shot back. He chuckled, looking at me with a spark that made my chest tighten. Guess we make a good team then. We sat there in silence for a while, the sun dipping behind the trees. The world felt quieter out here, less complicated. I glanced over and saw him watching the sky, his expression open and unguarded. "Daniel," I said quietly. "Yeah? Why didn't you ever tell anyone you were struggling before the accident? You kept pushing even when you were clearly in pain." He gave a small shrug, eyes fixed ahead. "I didn't want to be the weak link. You know how this team is. Everyone expects me to be the tough one." "Being tough doesn't mean hiding," I said. "You could have talked to me." He looked at me then, his gaze soft but intense. "I didn't think you'd care that much." Something shifted in my chest. "You really don't know me that well, do you?" He smiled faintly, reaching out to brush a blade of grass from my sleeve. "I do now." That night we had dinner together in the mess hall, just the two of us. He was moving better now, no crutches, just a slight limp. As we ate, he told me stories from before he joined the team, growing up in a small town, sneaking out to play baseball with his cousins, getting into fights he never admitted to losing. "You were a troublemaker," I said, laughing. "Still am," he said with a wink. "But you like that about me." I almost choked on my drink. "Who says I like anything about you?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Your eyes. The way he said it, quiet, sure, sent a current through me. I couldn't look away. Later that week, during a rehab session, Daniel suddenly froze mid-step, pain flashing across his face. Hey, don't push it, I said, steadying him. He tried to shake it off, but I could feel him trembling. It's fine, damn it. His leg gave out and I caught him before he fell. He clung to me, breathing hard, frustration written all over his face. I'm sorry, he muttered. I hate this. I hate needing help. I tightened my hold around him. Stop apologizing. You don't need to be perfect. He looked up at me and something broke open in his expression. You're still here. Of course I am. Even when I'm like this? I smiled softly. Especially when you're like this. He stared at me for a long moment before whispering, I've liked you for a while, you know. Long before this. The words landed gently but deeply. My heart skipped. Daniel. He gave a nervous laugh. I didn't say anything because I thought you'd never look at me that way. You were always so focused, so serious. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Maybe I was just hiding it better than you. His eyes widened. Then slowly, he smiled. The kind that started in his eyes and spread until it lit up his whole face. So you're saying there's a chance? I'm saying, I murmured, helping him back into the chair. You should focus on healing first. Then we'll see. He chuckled, shaking his head. Always the responsible one. The next few days were lighter. We'd tease each other, share snacks, and talk late into the evening. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, and he'd grin like he'd been caught doing something forbidden. When he finally took his first unassisted steps across the cabin, I couldn't help cheering. He raised his arms like a champion, pretending to bow. See? Told you I'd walk again. I clapped, smiling. You did it. He reached out, taking my hand. We did it. In that moment, something simple but undeniable bloomed between us. It wasn't about injury or pity anymore. It was about trust, care, and the quiet truth we'd both been circling for weeks. He was healing, yes. But so was I, just in a different way. When Daniel finally returned to the team, it felt like the world had come full circle. The first day back on the training grounds was warm and golden, the kind of morning that smelled like beginnings. He walked beside me, no crutches this time. Just a faint limp, a proud smirk, and that same easy confidence that had somehow made me fall for him in the first place. Everyone turned to look when we arrived. A few clapped, some whistled, and one of the guys shouted, "Look who's back from his luxury vacation." Daniel laughed, tossing a mock salute their way. You mean my hellish rehab thanks to Nurse Overachiever here? He jerked his thumb toward me. The others laughed, but there was something softer behind their teasing. Respect, maybe, or quiet relief. They'd seen how bad the accident had been, how close he'd come to not walking again. They also saw the way we looked at each other now, and though no one said anything directly, I caught the knowing smirks. Didn't know you two got that close, one of them joked later, nudging me during drills. Yeah, I said, not bothering to deny it. Neither did I. It felt strange being back where everything had started. The same field, the same team, the same routines, and yet, everything was different. There was an ease between us now, something unspoken but deeply understood. When Daniel's legs started to ache, he'd glance at me, and I'd already be there with water or support. When I got frustrated with the team schedule, he'd bump my shoulder and mutter, "Breathe, Doc. You're gonna give yourself a stroke." It was domestic in the smallest, most unexpected ways. After practice one afternoon, he stayed behind on the field. I found him sitting on the bench, stretching his leg. "You're supposed to rest," I reminded him. He looked up with that grin that always managed to undo me. "You're still bossing me around? Some things never change. Someone has to make sure you don't break yourself again." He laughed, but then his voice softened. "I wouldn't have made it through without you." I sat beside him, the scent of grass and sunlight wrapping around us. "You would have. You're stubborn enough." He shook his head. "No, you were there when I hated everything, including myself. You didn't just take care of me, you saw me." My heart tightened. "You make it sound like I did something extraordinary." "You did," he said simply. Then he turned toward me, his knee brushing mine. "You stayed." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the others faded into the distance, replaced by the quiet hum of the wind. He reached out and took my hand, openly, without hesitation this time. "This okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's more than okay." He smiled. that quiet, unguarded smile that had become my favorite sight in the world, and leaned his head against my shoulder. We stayed like that, just breathing in sync, the world small and simple again. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the field in orange light, the coach walked past us and clapped Daniel on the back. "Glad to have you back, kid. Don't mess it up this time." Daniel grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it." As the coach walked away, he turned to me. "You know, I used to think getting hurt was the worst thing that could have happened. And now?" I asked. He looked at me, eyes bright with something honest and unflinching. "Now I think it was the best. Because it gave me you." My throat tightened. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just smiled, fingers tightening around his. The rest of the team began to pack up, calling out goodbyes, laughter echoing through the open air. But Daniel and I lingered behind, watching the last light fade. "I was assigned to look after you," I said quietly. "It was supposed to be temporary." He smirked, eyes glinting with warmth. "Guess you're stuck with me now." "Guess I am." He leaned in, brushing his lips against mine. Gentle, sure, the kind of kiss that didn't need to prove anything. Just real, just us. When we finally pulled away, I whispered, almost to myself, "I was sent to take care of you." But somewhere between the pain and the laughter, we began to heal each other. He smiled, resting his forehead against mine. "And now?" I smiled back. "Now I'm never letting go." The breeze shifted, carrying the sound of distant laughter and the faint echo of life moving forward. But for me, for us, and it felt like the world had finally quietly come home.